You've watched it happen. A parent, a neighbor, someone you love, strong and independent one year, and struggling to open a jar the next. You tell yourself it's just age. That muscle loss after 75 is inevitable. That everyone slows down eventually. But what if that's not actually true? What if the decline so many Americans experience after 75 isn't a fixed law of biology, but the result of something quieter, something almost invisible that most people never think to question? Because on the other side of the world, something very different is happening. In Japan, researchers keep encountering the same puzzling pattern. Seniors in their 80s who still climb stairs without hesitation. Seniors in their 90s who kneel to garden, then stand back up without needing to brace themselves. Whole villages where frail elderly barely exists as a category. This isn't a fluke. And it isn't genetics either. Because when Japanese people move to the United States and adopt an American lifestyle, their strength and longevity numbers begin shifting toward the American average within a generation or two. That single fact tells scientists something important. This isn't in the blood, it's in the daily habits. So today, we're going to look at why so many Americans lose strength after 75, what's really happening inside the body when that decline begins, and the specific Japanese habits that researchers believe help explain why so many seniors there stay strong, mobile, and independent well into their 80s and 90s. Let's start with what's actually happening inside a body that's losing strength. There's a medical term for it: sarcopenia. It sounds intimidating, but the idea is simple. Sarcopenia just means the gradual loss of muscle mass and strength that can happen with age. Think of your muscles like a garden. If nobody tends it, weeds don't just appear overnight. The garden slowly, quietly gets overtaken. That's sarcopenia. Not a single event, but years of quiet neglect adding up. Research published in outlets like the Journal of Cachexia, Sarcopenia, and Muscle has linked this kind of muscle loss to reduced independence, higher fall risk, and shorter, healthy lifespans. But here's what's important. Sarcopenia isn't just about getting older. It's heavily influenced by how a body is used and how it's fed day after day for decades. So why does this hit some populations harder than others? Part of the answer is movement, but not in the way most people expect. When Americans think about staying active, they often picture a gym membership or a dedicated 30-minute workout. Something separate from daily life. Something you have to plan for, drive to, and often eventually stop doing. But here's the surprising part. In many parts of Japan, especially in longevity hotspots like Okinawa, exercise was never really exercise at all. It was just life. Walking to the market instead of driving, gardening, sitting on the floor for meals, then using your own leg strength to get back up, sometimes dozens of times a day. Community radio calisthenics, known as Radio Taiso, played over speakers in parks and town squares each morning, where neighbors gather and move together. No equipment required. Researchers studying aging populations have pointed out that this kind of consistent, low-intensity functional movement spread across the whole day may protect muscle and joint health more effectively than occasional intense workouts followed by long periods of sitting. Think of it like a bridge. A bridge doesn't stay strong because of one massive reinforcement once a year. It stays strong because of constant, small maintenance every single day, distributed evenly across the whole structure. That's the first piece of the puzzle. But movement alone doesn't explain everything. Because here's what most people never realize. You can move all day long and still lose strength if your body doesn't have what it needs to rebuild. And that brings us to something happening at the dinner table. something scientists believe plays just as big a role as movement itself. But that's a story for the next part. Let's talk about food, because this is where things get interesting. Most people assume Japanese longevity comes down to fish and green tea, and yes, those matter. But researchers studying Okinawan and broader Japanese eating patterns have pointed to something else, something less about what's on the plate, and more about how much. There's a phrase in Okinawa, Hara Hachi Bu. It roughly means eat until you are 80% full. Now, on the surface, that might sound like just another diet rule. But think about what it's really doing. It's not restriction. It's awareness. It's the practice of pausing before the last bite, checking in with your body, and stopping just before full turns into stuffed. Here's why that matters for muscle. As we age, the body's ability to efficiently use nutrients for muscle repair naturally declines. Researchers sometimes describe this as anabolic resistance. Basically, the body needs more building blocks, delivered more consistently, to maintain the same amount of muscle it used to keep with less effort. Think of it like an old engine. It doesn't run on fumes anymore. It needs steady, quality fuel, not just occasional large refills. This is where protein enters the picture. Studies on aging and muscle health, including work published in journals focused on nutrition and geriatrics, suggest that consistent, moderate protein intake throughout the day, rather than one large meal, may better support muscle maintenance in older adults. And traditional Japanese meals are often structured exactly that way. Small portions, multiple dishes, fish, tofu, miso, natto, eggs, vegetables, spread across the day, rather than piled into one heavy dinner. Fermented foods like miso and natto also feed the gut microbiome, and emerging research suggests gut health may be more connected to inflammation and muscle maintenance than scientists once believed. So here's the pattern forming. It's not one miracle food. It's steady, moderate nourishment paired with steady, moderate movement, like a garden that's watered a little every day, instead of flooded once a week and left dry the rest of the time. But there's a third piece to this puzzle, and it's the one most people overlook completely. Because muscle and strength aren't only about food and movement. They're also deeply connected to something researchers call chronic low-grade inflammation, and to a much less physical concept, purpose. Scientists studying long-living populations have repeatedly circled back to a Japanese concept called Ikigai, loosely translated as a reason to wake up in the morning. It's not a productivity hack. It's something closer to a felt sense of purpose, of still being needed. Here's why this matters more than most people expect. Chronic stress and social isolation have been linked in research to elevated cortisol and systemic inflammation. And that inflammation doesn't stay contained. It's been associated with accelerated muscle breakdown, poorer recovery, and slower healing. Think of it like a smoke alarm that never turns off. A little stress response is useful. It protects you. But when it runs constantly in the background, day after day, it starts wearing down systems that were never designed to be on high alert forever. In many Japanese communities, especially rural and Okinawan ones, older adults often remain embedded in daily social and economic life. They're not sidelined. They're consulted, needed, involved. Elders often continue small responsibilities, tending a garden others rely on, watching grandchildren, running a small shop, well into their 80s and 90s. Researchers believe this ongoing sense of contribution may lower chronic stress, and by extension, may help protect the very muscle and mobility we've been talking about this whole time. So now we have three threads weaving together: movement built into daily life, steady, moderate nourishment, and a persistent sense of purpose that keeps stress and inflammation in check. But how does this actually show up in a single day? What does it look like when you put all three pieces together? That's where we're headed next. Let's walk through what a typical day might actually look like for a Japanese senior in one of these longevity-focused communities. Not as a strict formula to copy, but as a way to see how all these small pieces fit together. The day often starts early, and it starts with movement. Not a workout, just motion. A walk to buy fresh vegetables. A short session of radio taiso in a nearby park. Arms and legs syncing gently with a familiar tune that's been broadcast across Japan since the 1920s. It's not intense, that's the point. It's consistent. Breakfast tends to be small and varied. Maybe miso soup, a little rice, some fish, a few pickled vegetables. Not a large plate, several small ones. Already, without thinking about it, that person has practiced Hara Hachi Bu, stopping comfortably short of full, and given their body a spread of nutrients instead of one heavy load. Mid-morning might involve tending a garden, sitting down, kneeling, standing back up, again and again. Researchers who study functional fitness point out that these unconscious, repeated movements, sitting to standing, squatting to reach something low, are some of the exact patterns that predict independence in later life. It's not about lifting heavy weights. It's about staying capable of moving your own body through the ranges it needs every single day. Lunch and dinner follow a similar rhythm to breakfast. Small portions, plant-forward, often with tofu, natto, or fish providing protein, spread across the day, rather than concentrated in one sitting. Green tea, rich in compounds researchers have studied for their antioxidant properties, is often sipped throughout the day, not just at meals. And in the evening, there's often a social element. A conversation with neighbors. A role in the community, however small. Maybe checking in on a grandchild or being checked in on. This is where Ikigai quietly does its work. Not through some dramatic sense of destiny, but through the simple, repeated experience of mattering to someone else. Notice what's missing from this picture. There's no dramatic anti-aging regimen, no expensive supplement stack, no hour of grueling exercise followed by 23 hours of sitting. It's the opposite of the all-or-nothing approach that's become so common elsewhere. And that contrast is exactly what researchers believe explains so much of the difference. In many Western lifestyles, movement, nutrition, and social connection have become separated from daily life. You have to schedule them, drive to them, remember to do them. And when life gets busy, and it always does, they're often the first things to disappear. In Japan's longevity hotspots, these same three elements, movement, moderate nourishment, and purpose, aren't appointments. They're woven into the fabric of an ordinary day. That's the real difference. Not willpower, not superior genetics, design. Think of it like the difference between a river and a series of buckets. If you have to carry water in buckets on a busy day, you might skip it. But a river flows on its own, day after day, whether you're paying attention to it or not. Japan's traditional daily structure functions more like that river. Health isn't something extra you add. It's built into the current of the day itself. Now, it's worth being honest here. Japan isn't a perfect, untouched paradise. Modern Japanese cities are dealing with their own rising rates of sedentary lifestyles, processed food, and isolation, especially among younger generations. Researchers have actually expressed concern that some of these traditional protective habits are fading in urban Japan. So this isn't about idolizing an entire country. It's about learning from specific, well-documented patterns that have shown up again and again in longevity research, especially in places like Okinawa, and asking what's actually transferable. So the real question becomes, what can we take from this? Not as a copy-paste lifestyle, but as a set of small, realistic shifts. That's what we'll bring together next. Let's bring this all together. If there's one thing to take from everything we've covered, It's this: strength after 75 isn't primarily determined by genetics, and it isn't something that simply runs out like a battery on a timer. Based on the patterns researchers have observed, it's shaped day after day by three quiet forces working together: how the body moves, how it's fed, and whether the person using it still feels needed. So what does this actually mean for you, or for someone you love, starting today? Not a 5-step program, not a new gym membership, just a few small shifts, inspired by what we've explored. The first is about movement. Instead of thinking of exercise as something separate from your day, look for ways to fold it back in. Could a short walk replace a car trip you'd normally take without thinking? Could you build in a few moments of sitting down and standing back up, slowly, with control, the way gardening naturally demands? Researchers suggest that frequent gentle movement throughout the day may matter just as much as occasional intense effort, sometimes more. The second is about eating with a little more awareness. You don't need to overhaul your diet overnight. Just try pausing before that last bite. Ask yourself gently, not with guilt, whether you're at comfortable, not stuffed. Try spreading protein sources like fish, eggs, tofu, or beans across your meals throughout the day, rather than saving it all for dinner. Small, steady nourishment, like that engine we talked about, running on consistent fuel instead of empty stretches followed by overload. And the third, maybe the most overlooked, is purpose and connection. Ask yourself honestly, do you have a reason to get up tomorrow that has nothing to do with obligation and everything to do with meaning? Maybe it's a garden, a grandchild, a skill you could pass on, a neighbor who could use a conversation. Research increasingly suggests that this sense of being needed may help quiet the chronic stress that quietly wears down the body over time. None of these are dramatic. None of them require special equipment or a plane ticket to Okinawa. And that's exactly the point. The habits that researchers keep tracing back to strength and independence in later life were never about extremes. They were about consistency, woven so naturally into daily life that it barely felt like effort at all. Growing older doesn't have to mean growing weaker. The evidence increasingly suggests that so much of what we've accepted as inevitable may actually be more within our influence than we've been told. One small habit, repeated quietly, day after day. If you found this helpful, please like the video, subscribe to Elder Nova for more science-backed, healthy aging insights, and let me know in the comments which habit you're going to try first. I'll see you in the next video.